Milan? Wonderful. Okay. I think it's about time to start. I've got 1 more minute, but since we've got so many people already, we should start and make the best use possible of the hour we have. Okay, so welcome. This is the second web debate in a series of debates initiated by Diplo Foundation on the future of diplomacy. The debates take place every first Tuesday of the month, and we aim to discuss pressing issues of the profession. So last month, for example, we asked, is the diplomatic service still needed? Today, we have two distinguished diplomats joining us to discuss, can we learn diplomacy from books? Just to frame the debate a little bit, perhaps, there are three main trends we have to keep in mind. There is new technology, which means there's vast amounts of information, there are new ways of communicating, and there are also new ways of training diplomats. Second, we need new knowledge management approaches. And for both of these trends, we can argue that diplomats need a whole new skill set. And then, further, we can ask, are these skills actually provided by universities? Or is it only hands-on practical training that will give us these kind of skills? As I said, to address these really big and important questions, we have two distinguished diplomats joining us today. So we have Mr. Stefano Baldi joining us from Italy, and Professor Milan Jasperc joining us from Slovenia. Both have worked at the highest level of diplomacy. Both have published extensively on diplomacy, and both are involved in training the next generation of diplomats. So I think we have two ideally suited people to discuss the topic for today. My name is Katharina Höhne. I'm working with Diplo Foundation, and as you might have already heard, I'm stepping in for Dr. Jovan Kubalia, who is attending a high-level meeting at the World Summit on the Information Society. I'm going to be moderating, and I'm going to try and make the session as interactive as possible. So to do this, you might have already seen on your lower left-hand side of the screen, there's a chat window. So you can use it to type questions or comments, and then I will try to take these questions and comments and give them back to Stefano Baldi and Milan Jasperc. Good. Without further ado, I think it's time to invite Mr. Stefano Baldi to kind of kick us off, give us an introduction. Yeah?
Okay. Thank you very much, Katharina, and thank you to Ambassador Milan Jasperc for this occasion. And thank you also to Jovan, because we discussed this in the past, and he picked up the idea of this relatively strange topic. But I think Karina already, with her introduction, pointed out some of the possible discussions, or anyway point of views that could be interesting for answering to this question, which in fact has behind many other issues. It's deeper than what it looks. So why I'm interested, or why I have developed my own ideas about the preparation of diplomats, or what diplomats should know to perform well in their work. Of course, I've been dealing with training in the last 5 years, training of diplomats, junior diplomats and mid-career diplomats. So I have, again, developed my own ideas on what is needed especially for the next generation, as Katharina rightly said. What do we need for the diplomats of the 2020 or the 2030? Do we have any idea? And what is happening now in the universities, so before they're being recruited, and in the academia, in the institutes or the diplomatic academies, once they are in the career, is that the correct preparation? Is that the correct attitude that we have? That's some other things which are behind that. You will see in this first slide that I put on kindly, that Arvin put on kindly, and it's shared with you, that also, of course, I do all this for some advertisement of a very small book, which is there, which is called Manuale di Management per Diplomatici. Of course, not many of you will be able to profit of this opportunity because it is in Italian, but of course I'm trying to push everybody to learn Italian, and that can be easily downloaded online from my website, and it will be distributed. It's a booklet which has behind some of the issues that I will briefly introduce now with you. So this is a typical thing that I use, and it comes from 2006 picture with Diplo Foundation. So it's 10 years ago already, but it's always valid to explain what are the diplomatic activities once I go around, and I have to explain what are we. These are very familiar, I'm sure, to all of you. If you look carefully to all these activities, negotiation, communication, networking, and especially managing people and resources, you will see that this has some implications. Some implications which means that in order to perform well in those activities, you basically need two different kinds of skills. And that, I think, it's easy. This is the easiest part. The hard skills. Hard skills, legal, economic. I think these are the typical hard skills that you have as a requirement, and this will be also interesting to see for those who are being recruited one way or another in the diplomatic career. Certainly, this is the situation for us, especially the political, economic, and legal. Other studies. We, in Italy at least, we have certain limitations. But these are mainly the hard skills. So here already we have, and these generally are the skills which are provided by universities, basically, at least. So the first point could be, are universities doing enough in these skills for what we need? This could be a first question. Certainly, I have my own opinion. I'm not going to anticipate on this. We will see the discussion how it goes. But then there is another point. That's the second part, the second group. The second group, it's about soft skills. And that's here the thing becomes more complicated. Because, and here I just made some examples. All these examples are included in the book that I showed you. We tend to include these things one way or another in our training programs and in many other occasions. And I keep discussing this. But how important are the soft skills since the beginning? We can say one thing for sure, that all those skills, you have them or not once you are recruited, certainly you will have to learn them on the job. 100% sure. You will have to organize your ideas because you will be heading something, head of office, head of section, head of consulate, head of missions once you're older. So you will certainly have to organize ideas and project. Ideas means a project, way of working, whatever you mean. Certainly we have to communicate. Certainly we have to do all the rest. Negotiating, it goes without saying. Time management is one of my, idea fix in my mind. I think this is a basic thing for doing things. Leadership, no need to say that an ambassador needs also very often to be a leader, not only manager. But anyway, these are just examples. This you will learn on the job. One of my points is, since they will be needed from day one, are these things coming also from universities? Are they being taught? What are the consequences if they are not taught enough? Are the universities again doing enough in this sector? Again, I have my own experience. I have my own ideas on this. I'm not going to immediately share this with you. because I want to see the discussion. We could have a poll even later on if we need, or if it can be useful. But I wanted to draw your attention also on this part of knowledge that, in my opinion, is becoming more and more important for our to perform well in our work. Let me say another last thing. I've been also, as a training director, I've been, of course, participating and sharing our activities at EU level, in particular, with the other 27 member countries, with the other 27 training directors. And what I can tell you, especially in these last 5 years, is that our discussions, and not only because I participate to the discussions with my own ideas, they also come from others, our discussions more and more underline that there is a certain need to improve the soft skills of our junior diplomats, because this part is recognized by more or less all of my colleagues as something which is lacking. So, of course, I'm already trying to influence what I want to say and what I want to discuss. But this is a common feeling that I have found in our discussion, and which is coming out more and more. You will find that more often people, my colleagues or people involved in training, which complain about the fact that people are not yet good enough to communicate for our work. You will not find the same kind of complaint saying that they are not well prepared in international law rather than in history or international relations for what is needed in the work. So I think I took my 7 + 1 minute, even more than what I was supposed to. Katrina was nice enough not to stop me before, but I will stop myself and leave the floor to Ambassador Jatzbeck. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefano. That was perfect. So Milan, would you like to give us your views and perhaps respond to the points just made?
Okay, thank you very much, and my best regards to everybody. I'm glad to be part of this group here. While listening to Stefano, I was also with one eye reading the comments, and some of them I found extremely interesting. I guess it looks like that we are in with the topic and of the discussion. Maybe from a very personal point of view, let me tell you this. I'm one of those few diplomats who actually never had any interest in diplomacy. Plus, I also openly declare this, as you just heard it. So it means that I did not attend any graduate studies that would prepare me for diplomacy. I attended diplomatic academy in Belgrade in the Yugoslav times long ago. So I'm glad that I can discuss this quite rhetorical and academical question. We know the answer, or basically we can guess what it would be, but I think it's important to discuss things which maybe at first glance look very clear and very plain to us, but it's good to discuss, to have a brainstorming about this. So can we learn diplomacy from books, or can we learn or get enough education, skill and preparedness for diplomacy going through the university system? Well, yes and no. We know that the answer would be something like that. But I think we can also add a sub-question saying, do universities nowadays require from students that they learn from books, or they just have to prepare weekly short essays, discuss them, and hardly see any books? Because I think that going through books, reading books about diplomacy, it's a must. It's the starting point to have the impression about the profession, about the nuances, about the aspects, about everything what one can get through that way, and to see what will expect, what will wait for him, her in the arena where the person steps in as a junior diplomat, to say so. But of course, one thing is just reading books, another thing is studying them. So I guess that universities nowadays still require from students to study from this. Next, diplomacy. We know that there are that many definitions of diplomacy as many there are authors. So it looks a kind of confusion issue, but I think we can also say that none of these definitions are contrary to each other. So they complement each other. So I think that it shows also that the diplomacy from one point of view is a very traditional profession that in its very essence, maybe in its very basic issue, 2-3 topics practically hasn't changed. But there are many aspects that are changing constantly all the time, and this of course requires getting to know different aspects in different situations. Thirdly, I think we can say that diplomacy, or at least I would have such a look at it, could be understood as a dynamic social process, which means producing information, transferring information across to the counterpart, and of course using this for creating foreign policy. So I say dynamic social process. It means that it depends primarily on the given historical and social context, framework, situation. And this then influences the definition of diplomacy, and it also influences, at least partially, how to study diplomacy, how to learn it. Maybe a few sentences more, then I will just finish. I try to follow one nice proverb that I heard in one of my previous lives. I heard that it is an Arab proverb saying, "Do it fast, speak little, tell a lot." So a few minutes more. Books, again books. I think that when we speak about books, let us make a few categorizations. Okay, number one, or I'm just listing it without any specific order, just as it appears. There are many handbooks, manuals, instructions, textbooks, etc. about diplomacy. We know all this: Berridge, Barston, Feltham, Nicholson, Sato, etc., etc. This is a must. Then we have scientific monographs that try to theorize on diplomacy, not just telling what it is and how to behave, what to do, but what it is theoretically. So, for example, there is a extremely good book from Christer Johnson and Martin Hall, Essence of Diplomacy. It goes into very deep theorizing what does this mean. Then the French author Leger-Fellet, I hope that I pronounce his name well, correctly, the dynamics of diplomacy. So there are things that we should also contemplate from theoretical point of view and how it fits in the given context. Then, of course, diplomatic memoirs. We know that it's important to get acquainted with them, to read them, because they offer us a variety of different contexts in which diplomacy materializes. A professional diplomat in his, let's say, 40 years career, you can go around 5, 6, maybe 7 postings. So it's a very short selection of variety of environments where you work. But in diplomatic business profession, it is important that you accumulate as much knowledge as possible, as much experience as possible. So that's why you need books, simulations. That's why you also need some other things, how to get to this. And very useful way of getting to know this is reading books about anecdotes. For example, Diplomatic Beck is a famous one. It tells you a lot in a very short, concise form. Then also novels on diplomacy, for example, Red and Black from Stendhal, Madame Bovary, etc. So to conclude, this is my first point. Reading books, of course, have to, hopefully also at the universities, then trying to keep in mind the necessity, ever-increasing necessity of selection, of prioritizing. This is what Katerina mentioned at the beginning, a flood of information. It puts diplomat, especially ambassador, in a position where she has to make decisions and priorities all the time. This is one of the most important things. And here, maybe just mention for the end, I see a very important and useful book from our friend Kishan Rana, The 21st Century Diplomat, From Plenipotentiary to CEO. So, well, it's a kind of trend, but again, in the very core essence, it remains as it was. So this is from my part for this beginning.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, there was already so much in both presentations. I think what I personally take away most from Stefano is the really good mapping of soft skills that we have on the screen right now. And from Milan, this very good overview on the types of diplomatic books or of books on diplomacy and how to use them and why they're necessary. There were already quite a number of questions, so I think I'm going to jump right into this. A comment from Kishan. He says diplomatic studies is understudied in Europe, and so he raises a concern that actually we should perhaps increase the study of diplomacy in Europe. He mentions there are a few good examples, but generally it's understudied. Liz Galvez raises an interesting point because she has a concern, I think, with the kind of academic books that are written about diplomacy. And she says they focus a lot on a kind of commercial perspective on, well, commercial diplomacy, and this is quite not enough, she says. Then we have Alessandra, who says she worries in general about the quality of university and the quality of preparation that students get from university. One last one, perhaps, yes, also from Liz Galvez, who raises a concern about university writing. So she says the writing style you pick up at university is almost counter to the kind of writing style that you need in diplomacy. So she says it's very theoretical, perhaps, and the writing skills that diplomats need are concise, short. So perhaps you can start by responding to these kind of questions. I don't know. Would you like to go first, Milan?
Okay, thank you. Well, I cannot more than agree with Kishan Rana stating that diplomatic studies are understudied in Europe, maybe also elsewhere. But I would add here, there is a variety, a bunch of books, handbooks, which tell you what is diplomacy, how to behave, what to do, how to open the embassy, the arrival of the ambassador, agreement, all these things, and diplomatic functions and so on. But I think it is important. So at the end of the day, you actually don't know which book to take in your hands. I think it's also important to theorize diplomacy, to put it in the more broader context, that the diplomat, especially a junior diplomat, is aware what does this mean, all this practical knowledge that she has when stepping in the international arena with the first task going to the foreign minister in the receiving state. Not only have to have this narrow view on this, but it knows what does this mean, and that with this act, diplomat is contributing to the foreign policy of creation of the processes and activities in the international community. Paul Sharp and a few of his colleagues, they produced a very nice paper some time ago in which they say that diplomats are producing the international community. So this, what diplomats do, is not just handling some basic skills like everybody, but it produces this, what we call foreign policy and relations among states. So it is important that diplomats are aware of this, and for this we need a kind of theorizing, and this comes from studying and producing. I try to contribute to this with my, let's say, field of sociology of diplomacy. Then I think it's also interesting to keep in mind that with this studying and with this focusing on diplomacy, that we get to understand what it is all about. I remember one very important scenery from the famous novel on diplomacy, the Travnik Chronicles. It was written by the Serb author from Yugoslavian times, Ivo Andrić, He describes and contemplates the situation in western Bosnia during the time of Napoleon, when Napoleon decides to send his consul there. And then also the Austrians do the same. And then both consuls, the Austrian and the French, they compete with each other and then to try to get as closer as possible to the local authority. But after a year or something, they notice that the local authority does not care about neither of them, and that they are, in spite having different interests, on the same side with the competitive interests. I think such lessons are very important. Then just a comment about commercial and diplomacy and these things. I see that we can say that also because of this increased influence of technology possibilities and their use in the diplomacy, we can see a kind of fragmentation, inner fragmentation diplomacy, commercial diplomacy, financial diplomacy, public diplomacy, etc. Of course, this is good and important to bear in mind, but again, we should not lose from the picture the main chorus of diplomacy, what it is. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's my turn tonight.
Yeah, please.
Katrina, thank you. Thank you. Well, there are so many inputs, and you summarize only some, and now I keep going. I'm glad that we have this so many observations and ideas. I'm overwhelmed in a way. So let me share with you a couple of things which came to my mind, having a look at all this and what also Milan just said, even in his introduction. And sorry if I might sound provoking again on some points. We very much concentrated on books because the title is on books. Okay, well, those who know me, they know how much I love books. So don't take whatever I say this guy doesn't look at books anymore, or just he looks at books just to put them on the shelves, because that could be another reason. No, I also read. But when we say when we are concerned about learning today, do we realize that today learning is not only coming from books, especially if we think of new generations, or what is coming now in the next 10 years. I mean, the book is let's say the tradition which we should keep, and then we have the innovation. Do we agree that even the work of diplomat is made of these two elements, tradition and innovation? They cannot go alone. I mean, one without the other are not going to produce a good diplomat today for tomorrow. Well, this is my assumption, of course. It can be debated. Starting from this assumption, let's take books as one way to convey, to learn the tradition. Why I say this? Let's take memoirs, and let me also underline here a kind of special memoirs. This is not advertisement, but I'm glad that Ambassador Rana, just mentioned his last book, which is Diplomacy at the Cutting Edge, which was so kind to send to me, which is a kind of memoirs, a kind of. We know that whatever Kishan produces, it's always a kind of. It's always something new. It's not exactly, that's why he also wrote the Diplomats of the 21st Century, and it's always very much in advance. So he describes so many situations and possibilities. It's a kind of memoirs, but also trying to share with the others the experience. So he's sharing the tradition, even if Ambassador Rana in the tradition has always a certain amount of innovation, even in the past, I must say. But let's say memoirs, books written by those who study academics, they are very good to a certain tradition, to know, to learn. And this is extremely important. But let's go to innovation. That's why I talk about also soft skills. Let's talk about innovation. What do we need for the next 5 years? So how do we learn that? Of course, also from some books, very few. But now we have also other means to learn. We have online learning that we know from Diplo Foundation since a long time. We have a lot of visual learning. Visual learning, I mean, we have all now the TEDx. We have all the interviews which are available online. We have documentaries which are available online. We have radio programs. This I know because for those who know me, I produce radio programs speaking about diplomacy and what diplomats does. We have tutorials. You go on YouTube, you can go for all kind of tutorials about communication, negotiation, and the young generation, they look at these things as much as they do at books. I'm not saying that this should replace books, which is not what I mean. I mean that we have to take into consideration that if we want to rewire, to relearn, as Alvin Toffler learned, we also have to take into consideration these new tools, which are the tools which are more used by the new generation. Some of the people of the new generation will be the new diplomats. So we have also to take that into consideration once we say, can we learn from books? Books, in my opinion, is at large in this case. Many other things as well. And there is a lot more than books that we can use to learn. So this is what was one point that certainly I wanted to make, which is important. Let me make another one which comes to my mind from the discussion. I do agree that studying is essential. It's essential for the hard skills, no problem. It is essential also for the soft skills because there are some things that need to be studied, some techniques. And so it doesn't mean that everything which is soft skills is innovation. It has to be learned in different ways. No, I'm only saying that this is not done enough about soft skills. But anyway, this study is important. I think it is very important, more than ever nowadays, in our job to be a good diplomat. On top of the studying, also the sharing. Because some things that need to be studied or need to be known must be shared. In this way, the sharing is not something new, because when you write memoirs, it's a way of sharing. You share your experience, you share it with the others, they can learn from your experience or they can adapt. But it's more and more needed, there's more and more the need to share. Not only the old, experienced colleagues, but also sometimes the young ones who should share their knowledge in order to improve also the way that we act. And that's this idea of sharing is now becoming as much important as the idea of studying. I think I took even too much time. I have many other things, but I want to hear what's going on now with the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stefano. We've been mentioning Kishan Rana's and his approach he's taking, which is not quite memoir, not quite fiction. So I thought maybe we can invite Kishan to say a bit about his approach and what the book is about and what he thought when he was writing it and how he thinks it contributes to diplomatic training. Kishan, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thanks. What I fully agree with almost everything that both Stefano and Ambassador Milan have said. I just have a couple of points I want to make. First, we cannot really expect universities and academic institutions to teach soft skills. Their response would be, that's not what we do. We give basic grounding, we teach an academic approach, and that is perhaps as it should be. That's point number one. Point number two, we didn't touch on distance learning, and I say this not only because I have been working with Diplo for 16 years, but really, distance learning is a particularly effective method for a profession whose members are typically, at least half of them, distributed abroad. It's extremely expensive to bring people to the home country or to bring them to another off-site location for face-to-face training. So distance learning has a special role. And that brings me to my third point. The UK Diplomatic Academy seems to be pioneering a rather new approach to learning. It is, as I understand it, and I have not visited them, I've only read a little bit of their methods, it seems that they are relying on diplomats who join their programs to kind of drive their own learning process. So it is not faculty intensive, it is a distance program, and it kind of leaves to the participants to work with their own groups and engage in mutual learning. And really, in this profession, much of learning takes place through exchanges among participants themselves. It's not that the teacher or the lecturer is the fount of all wisdom. In fact, it's the participants in their conversation, in their narration of personal experiences, they infect each other with new ideas. I think these are some of the approaches which are relevant, and they also lead to the teaching of soft skills. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kishan. Very interesting points. Maybe if I can just jump in from a UK perspective, because you said universities find it hard to teach soft skills or are not really meant to be teaching soft skills. It's actually, so this is something that came up in the chat where Jana shared her experience with us, saying that she misses things like case studies, like simulations in her university training in Macedonia. Interestingly, from the UK perspective, we now try to switch to university education that really fosters soft skills to attract students and to be able to tell students, you're going to learn soft skills, which then is going to make you employable, which is very interesting, almost dichotomy between different types of university training. I was going to ask Milan, going back to something that Stefano actually introduced, because Stefano in his earlier intervention was saying that there's a distinction between the tradition of diplomacy and the innovation part of diplomacy. And for tradition, we need books, and books are fine, whereas the innovation part needs a very different kind of skill set, which probably cannot be learned by books or probably not in university. So I was interested in hearing your thoughts on this distinction between the tradition and innovation, and then the kind of skills involved and how to acquire them.
Yeah, thanks. I was following this with a huge interest, and as a professional diplomat, I'm now in the dilemma. Should I answer your question directly, or should I answer to your question diplomatic way to tell this what I want to tell and not this what you want to hear? Both, of course. Let me just first mention that I was following this what Stefano was discussing with huge interest, and a question occurred to my mind, the following one: what is actually a book today? It's a matter of technical approach. So maybe it will be better if we say that reading is important, reading, volumes, then short things and so on, reading, then I would say discussing this, what you have read, simulating, to get as much as possible, let's say, physically, different situations in your mind, in your awareness, and then implementing this. Maybe this could be one of the conclusions of this our discussion, pro and contra, to say so, although I don't take it that much, let's say fixed. And here, of course, I have to mention that I was enjoying highly reading Stefano's book, or edited book, Through the Diplomatic Looking Glass. I mean, it shows typically what is the function of the book or a text which is being offered to us through a technical device. I haven't had the chance to have a look at the Kishan Srana the book Diplomacy at the Cutting Edge, but I had this phrase in mind, cutting edge, to mention it at least, because I think that diplomats, when they go in the profession, when they go on the spot, in the receiving state, you have to have a kind of cutting edge. You have to go further, you have to advance, you have to progress activities, relations between the two sides. And for this, of course, you need many different understanding, knowledge, skills. You need both tradition, that you're on the firm ground, that you know what are you doing, and of course you need innovation, that you can adapt to the current, to the situation where you are. So a kind of synergy between the tradition and between innovation, where it has to be known. We have to know where is the place for tradition and where is the place for innovation. So innovation as a continuation, a substantial, advanced continuation of the tradition. I would try to complicate the answer via that approach. Thanks.
Thanks. Stefano, you look like you want to respond. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, because you know that every time I have this chance to put some of my ideas to the test, I keep learning other things, and I keep also having other ideas. And let me start from something that Ambassador Rana, that Kishan said, which I don't share. Which doesn't happen very often, because I really feel very much in line always with Kishan. But this is not about diplomacy in stricto sensu. It's about the role of universities. I think this is interesting. And this comes from my experience as trained directors. Okay, and what I'm doing with universities. So Kishan said that and in a way, even Katrina was not at ease with that. They said, look, I don't think universities should do anything about soft skills. I'm pushing it a bit more on what you said, okay? Well, I'm not sure that they cannot do much. In fact, there are some Italian universities that are starting to do this. And if you take, and you see, understand what I have in mind, what some American universities, but even UK universities are doing indirectly, they are dealing with these issues of skills. Why I say this? There's somebody who just finished university, very bright, he wins the competition, and he comes to me as junior diplomat. Fine, great. He has a great knowledge of international law, of economics. It's really very bright, very prepared, very well prepared, right? But then I tell him, okay, now, all these things, these are extremely useful and important. You know how to write. You learn very well how to write. But now what? You know what? Now you have to take care of 3 people and make them work. You have to, manage resources. And he's clever, maybe, and he starts trying to understand how you can motivate people, how you can organize their work, how can you, supervise, all these things. I mean, you learn this. But why? Wouldn't it be very useful for me if he had known something, even before from university on some techniques to do this better? Oh yes, it would have saved me a lot of time, because what he hasn't learned at university, but it's needed for the work, I have to train them, unless they only learn it on the spot, which is never enough. So the more I get from university, the better it is. And this is not only needed for diplomats. This is needed by companies. This is needed by self-employed people. This is needed by start-uppers. So shouldn't we underline this in order to make university understand that if they do something about this, it will be very useful for the employer and also for the competitiveness of the person who will apply for a job. And this is what I'm doing with universities when they come to me and they said, how can we improve the program of political science so that more of them, they have chances to become diplomats or to become international officers. So they expect me to say, you know, they should know more, change this program of international law. No, this is not the point. The point is to be more competitive and more useful on the job. They should do more about soft skills. And there are some career services, and here I finish. There are some career services of universities which are doing quite a lot, which are doing what is being requested, are doing some simulations, are doing some occasions of exchange of views with people who already work, are doing some seminars on time management, are doing some seminars on communication nowadays. There are already a lot of activities on negotiating. So that's a particular part which is taken for granted. But even the others, problem solving, and many others, they are doing something, and that makes the difference. That makes it. That's why I'm pushing along that way. Of course, it should complement what is being done. You shouldn't have a course on soft skills. A diploma on soft skills. That's not the point. These are complementary elements. We should go there and being put together with the hard skills. They would find that you would have the right mix, the mix which is useful for the employer. I am the employer at this very moment. I will stop here.
Thank you, Stefano. It's a very interesting development in the discussion. Like, we can agree that maybe should or can't offer uniform. And also, it comes from our chat window, broad agreement on kind of broadening the idea of what the book, a point Milan made earlier, so that we should include other online learning, other ways of sharing information. And then on this point of sharing information, Liz Galvez made a very interesting intervention. So she says in her personal career she experienced a lot that people would jealously guard information or their skills and not share them. So maybe how this can be arranged or encouraged even in a profession to share your skills and basically help the next generation of diplomats. This might also be something interesting to keep in mind for. Milan, do you have a response to what Stefano just outlined for us?
Actually, I'm glad that Stefano pointed out this, because that's the point. Not just skills as such, but skills combined with something what you need. As a diplomat, you need this and that, and here you attach learning of the skills and practicing this and so on. This as a rule. This about sharing information. Well, speaking as an insider, I can say that this happens a lot, many times all around, that more experienced keep some information for them and don't share with others, or persons that have some information are not willing to share it with others. But of course, this is not good. It isn't good for anybody. I think when you're already in the diplomatic business, part of the ministry and so on, I think it's important that there is a constant share of information. I don't have in mind now primarily this, let's say, information that you need for a daily work to produce papers and so on, but the information as experiences, advices of diplomats that have something to tell, to transmit to others. For example, when an ambassador returns from his posting abroad, or a senior diplomat, she should have it. I think it's a must. A lecture for the colleagues in the ministry, or at least for the related departments if the ministry is too big, and to share information not about let's say, political activities that ambassador or a senior diplomat did, but about impressions, feelings, and experiences from the ground, from the spot. Diplomat as a human being, as a person. I think these are things that there is a need to be shared among diplomats. Well, the same goes for, let's say, discussions or visits of diplomats, senior diplomats at the universities, to be guests at different workshops with the students and exchange things, and then to present them what does this, what they master in theory, look like in practice. This is a highly useful source of enriching skills that cannot be praised enough. At least if I judge from my own experience, only listening to the senior diplomats, I learned that much that it is very difficult to tell and to express. I think it's very important. So this sharing must be a rule for educating other diplomats, as much as selection is a rule that you can go along with your daily work.
Yeah, thank you. Stefano, that mirrors your experience, right?
No, I fully agree. I must say, I fully agree with what Ambassador Jatzberg just said completely. And I think in a way this is sometimes what I'm trying to already implement. But of course I should open up the discussion that sometimes old colleagues, they tend only to remember the good old times instead of, trying to pass the human part of their experience. And that I don't like generally. I like when they are good enough and clever enough to really pass other parts of their experience, which is mainly related with the human factor. Let me take this point to show you what was which is along this line, and another slide that I had prepared. I didn't know if we had to use it or not. One. This is a very simplified. Don't take into consideration last two lines. These are ideas for the visual that I would like to use. But this is, in my opinion, very simplified. The sequence, knowledge is very important. That's what we talked before. Books, preparation. It doesn't matter hard or soft skills. Books. Experience, it comes after, because by definition you cannot have it before. It starts after you have some knowledge or a strong knowledge. You need a balance of all this. You cannot only learn by doing without having a strong basis. So this is what is important for us. But of course, in the long run, we all, I think, agree experience prevails. This, I think, for me, it's very important. You tend to forget what you have learned. You keep learning, but you keep learning also from what you're doing, from the others. So this experience prevails, but it can prevail only if you have a strong knowledge that you had in the past. Why I say this? And here I introduce one last point. Of course, there are so many, and I really want to say sorry for all the things that I will not be able to answer of the interesting discussion on the chat. But I would like also to introduce this element. If these 1, 2, 3, 4 points that I put there in the sequence are true, I think that experience in our work in diplomacy, in the long run, is extremely important. Why I say this? Because it implies that in order to have the best diplomats, you should have people who are, coming from the diplomatic career. I know that I'm defending a certain kind of approach, but I still believe that once you drop somebody to be ambassador, and this is the tradition of some countries, it cannot be as effective as the others. So you cannot learn diplomacy by books, not only because there is a lot more, but because the experience you get on the basis of your initial knowledge is, in the long run, as important as the knowledge itself of the beginning. So this is why, you have to go up, you have a career and everything else. I know that this sounds very conservative from somebody who's pleading always about innovation. But I think this is part of the tradition that we have, which is there for some reason. When you have an ambassador which has quite a lot of experience behind, if he is clever enough, he's always much better of the one which comes with great ideas, but he hasn't got a clue because he doesn't have experience of what can and cannot be done in our world. So sorry if I summarize all this, jumping on many steps. But I think this could be a part of our discussion, coming from, can we learn diplomacy from books? Thank you.
Thank you. So many interesting discussions right again. I think just my perspective, maybe draw a couple of points together before we conclude and before you both get the chance to have like a final concluding statement on the session and on the question we've been discussing, which is, can we learn diplomacy from books? So interesting things I noticed was we had a very interesting outline from Stefano on soft skills, which is, I think, absolutely crucial to be aware of what's actually needed when we talk about soft skills. We had a very good outline from Milan on the different kinds of books that are out there on diplomacy and how we can use them. We mentioned Kishan Rana's book, which tries to bridge the gap between an account from a practitioner as well as and a textbook, right? Which is very interesting. We then discussed about universities and their possibility and challenges to teach soft skills. And then many interesting points on diplomatic training, what diplomats need to be effective and what young diplomats need to be effective. So many, many interesting things. Okay. So on that note, I think I'm gonna close it for questions now and invite Milos and then Stefano for a last statement on our very intense and very interesting discussion today.
Okay, thank you. 2 points very briefly. First, having especially in mind this what Stefano just said, I stick to the tradition. I think it should be there, but of course one has to be open for innovation, for flexibility, and to react. I think this is the best combination. Second, at the end of the day, diplomats are also human beings, people like everybody else, and they have to have a touch for reality, for human relations. One anecdote, one joke that used to be anecdote that would illustrate this. An ambassador of the sending state had once to hand over the diplomatic protest, a note in the receiving state, and when he got an appointment with the DG, whom he know well, they were good friends personally, he came to the meeting and handed over the note, and he protested and explained why is he protesting, etc. And then at the end of the meeting, the DG was so kind enough to accompany him to the lobby, to the lift. And when they were going down the lobby in a relaxed atmosphere, the DG, the host, asked his colleague ambassador, he said, well, my friend, I fully understand that you had to do this. It's instruction, you had to protest. But I wonder, why did not you protest with much more energy? Why this your protest was so mild, so watered down? And then the answer from His Excellency was, well, my friend, my government is paying me well, but my government is not paying me that much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, I think this is very good, and certainly this is something that I always try to convey, that diplomats are human beings, because still I have a lot of problems as diplomats to make people, not even ordinary people, but even those who are interested in diplomacy, to let them know not only what we do, but also what we are. And I think being human is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength, and also of being able to do your own work in a proper way. So I completely agree about that. The only thing I can say on top of the too many things that I dropped on the floor is that there are so many points in the discussion as a chat that we could have touched. I like the point that was made, for example, on oral history and the role of oral history. I'm excited about that. I think that would need a proper and a single discussion on that. And I can anticipate that we do very little in Italy about oral history, which is a real pity, And I have a lot of ideas there, and I've done some experiments. But so this is. I'm happy that this session, in fact, provoked so many different avenues, because that was also one of the intentions. For example, it came out the interest for the list that Milan mentioned at the beginning. I think, of course, it's impossible to have an objective list of books that should be, you know, the top 10 books that you should read or should study about diplomacy. That would cause a revolution, but it's interesting to give suggestions on the basis of experience. And I think this is something where also Diplo could do something with big disclaimers, you know. And of course, Jeff Berridge, which is always being associated, and Kishan Rana would have a special role in this list for sure, but there are others. And I think that would help a lot. So simple things can come out. There are many different single elements which should be of inspiration, I think, for other future activities. And I wish to thank really not only Catherine and Milan, but also everybody who's been so active in this discussion. Your contribution will not be lost. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you both, Stefano and Milan. It was a wonderful discussion. There was so much inspiration and so many things we can take on in future debates, and so many things we actually need to explore more. So thank you so much. On that note, I'd also like to announce the next web debate, which is the first Tuesday of June, and the topic is research on diplomacy useful and relevant? Again, highly controversial and provocative. So hopefully I see many of you in a month's time. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks, Stefano. Thanks, Milan.